everything that's taking place in our country right now, in our city, shouldn't be seen as something new. That if you look at history in itself, right, documented history and research, we've seen people with institutional power either oppress, take advantage, or in many cases even justify homicides. And the ripple effects that actually has had in the past is that we sometimes temporarily do kind of band-aid solutions. And if you look at something that happened in Detroit in the 40s, where there was an officer who shot a young man there, an African-American man, and the ripple effects that it had within the context of the Chicago Police Department as well. People were trying to figure out, well, how do you solve this if this happens here or in similar cases that might be existing at that time? And I think that we try to solve problems, but often either there's not a long-term commitment to it, or the reality is that there's a lot more behind the scenes. There's cultures that need to be changed. There's structures of accountability and measurements that need to take place. And I think that's a part of it, and I think there's also a part of how the community responds to those things, and where do you find opportunities and where do you see the medium point as well, but which is often, something that's open for debate and something that that obviously we still haven't really, solved to this point.
I think, though, historically, there are moments where our movement, I'm talking the movement of black people and minorities in the United States, have affected change in the system where it has worked. The Voting Rights Act worked for the most part. And the reason it worked is because 2 years after we elected the first black president, several states, North Carolina, Texas, what they tried to do, they tried to change the Voting Rights Act and repeal it. And then the Supreme Court said key parts of it were all of a sudden unconstitutional. So those kind of changes are what I'm talking about. How do we attack the system at its heart and change it at its core to be more fair for minorities, and whether it be black, Latino or Latina, Muslims, they're being targeted too. And we have to step up and protect them as well, because if they target Muslims, they're going to target us next, or vice versa. If they're targeting us, if they're not valuing our lives, they're not going to value the lives of someone else. And life is life, and that's what they preach, and that's what they say. But clearly that's not the case. Right. So I think, targeting those things at the core, that change the core of the system, is what I'm focusing on.
I'm a strong advocate and believer in outreach. You need to go reach the people that's out here doing these crimes and talk to them, because most of them are just misguided. They come from broken homes. I came from a one-parent household, just like the rest of a lot of them. I was raised in foster homes and stuff like that, just like a lot of them. I also worked in CPS, so that gave me a first-hand look on how important education is, because the school-to-prison pipeline is very real. The same students that I was teaching, they probably was 8th grade at the time a couple years ago. They was reading on the 3rd grade level. Now they probably should have been freshmen or sophomores. I see them on the block now selling dope. You know what I'm saying? So we need to take a lot of the money from the police and penalize them for when they do bogus stuff to us, and send more resources to the community. I think once we see that, we'll see a big reduction in shootings, period.
I agree with what you're saying, and I definitely believe that there's a lot of power in communities, and it doesn't get discussed enough about how much power is in the community. And I definitely just want to lift up the fact that there are things, like you said, in small pockets that are happening. There are communities who are going to a restorative justice framework. There are communities who are saying, instead of us waiting and calling the police, we're going to be present on our block and make sure that there's no shootings within the community, and also that there's no cops coming in here brutalizing our young people, right? And I think the difference is, and I want to push back on this thing about it not being about money and racism. It's not just about racism. It's not just about money, just like it's not just about sensitivity training or body cameras, but it's about the interconnection of those things. Like, if we can trace any type of thing that's broken, the things that are supposed to be a part of making our communities whole and stable, we can follow the money to understand why it's not working. If we look at a day in the life of a child, when we look at their homes and the access that they have to healthy food or sufficient nutrition, that's a money issue. That's a resource. That's money. If we think about when they go into schools and why they're seeing a police officer or officer of the state before they see somebody who's asking about them and checking on their mental state, checking on their heart and wellness. And then we go into the classrooms with these teachers. First of all, a lot of the teachers been pushed out who look like the children that they serve and come from the communities that they live in. And then on top of that, we have the teachers who are there and who have chosen a vocation to take care of young people. It's more stuff coming down on them about holding them accountable, being evaluated 4 times a year, right? Making sure that they're putting in all this stuff to teach these kids about test scores, which, mind you, these tests are from corporations who get money off of this testing, right? That's a money issue, right? And then you tell them when they go home, can they get a job? And what kind of job can they get? Does it have a living wage? Can they go to a community center? Is it one that's open and is actually funded to provide them with a myriad of opportunities like in Lincoln Park or Lakeview? I know people who are in their communities, again, I'll say patrolling, make sure nothing's going on, giving food that they're paying for out of their own pocket. I know folks who are doing community work and who are doing arts programs so that young people can have a voice and a platform and understand my voice does matter. Even though there's all these people telling me that nothing about me matters, not even my life, my voice and furthermore, my creativity is a contribution and I'm an asset in this community. The thing about it though is once again, back to money and racism, is that it can't be brought to scale because where's that money coming from? There are people who, just like you and your wife, who are doing it out of the love for their people. And I think that once we have an opportunity to get deeper into this question that you're asking about community is when we can get deeper into how do we all start to revitalize our communities by putting more investment in having funding and having support and having more hands on deck for supporting our young people as opposed to pathologizing them.